always been afraid of falling, walking up the stairs. I think that would be a grand introduction. Thank you for coming out this evening. It's truly a pleasure to be here and to get to walk through the Margaret Mitchell house and to see where she sat and where she wrote and where she slept. And I'm sure that if I got permission to live there, I could write the great American novel. There's no doubt in my mind that it's haunted. So there have to be many stories. I just thought of a quick anecdote when I heard the name Ann Rivers Siddons, because I heard her speak one night, and she was at the end of a long tour, and I'm at the end of a long tour, 31 days, and I just have 2 or 3 more days to go. And my son, who lives in Singapore, Sean, sitting in the back there, has agreed to, actually he volunteered to accompany me on this tour. Anyway, I was listening to Ann Rivers Siddons talk, and she said that at the end of 30 days she was just so exhausted she didn't know what town she was in. She didn't know what hotel she was staying at, and I understand that because I often have to go ask them at the hotel, what is the name of this hotel, or what city am I in? I made a phone call today to say, what time is it? And the woman told me, and I said, and what city am I in? Is this St. Louis? And she said, no. And anyway, Ann Rivers Siddons said that a woman handed her a book to sign, and she took the pen and she wrote, for deposit only. I've liked her ever since for being able to tell that story. I'll tell you a little bit about myself. I started writing when I was quite young. I read before I went to school, and I lived with my grandmother. And we'd sit on the front porch in the evening and watch the kids come home from school, and I couldn't wait till I could be one of those students coming home at that same time. So when I started to school, I think I was put in the Redbird group of readers because I read well, and I liked to write. I liked to write stories that would please my classmates and my teachers, because if they were pleased, then they'd put your story up on the board for people to look at later and read. And I always wrote either very frightening stories, monster kinds of stories, or something funny, because that's what kids liked. And I didn't get much attention at home because I didn't live at home very often. I lived with my grandmother, as I said, and though she would listen to my stories, she had other things to do, so she wasn't that good a listener. When I was in 3rd or 4th or 5th grade, I started reading adult literature because I found it much more titillating, I suppose, than the stories that other kids were reading. And in our home, my parents didn't spend much money on books. We had 2 books, the Bible and God's Little Acre. And we had God's Little Acre because my mother thought it was a religious book. She never read it, but I did. And I wrote a book report on it. And I was sent to the principal's office. And I didn't see anything fair about that because it was a book, and weren't you allowed to read books? It seemed that you were. So then I was sent back to the books that were more appropriate for my age level, I suppose. But we had a wonderful librarian there who would let me take out more books than I was supposed to be allowed to take home with me. And if I returned one late, there was no fee for that. So I would go home on weekends with just piles of books, and I would come back on Monday and bring back all the books that I had read, and usually I had read all of them. So reading adult literature for me happened at a very young age, and I suppose writing stories did as well. I wrote some very bad poetry, terrible poetry, you know, the poetry that you write when you're a teenager. It's full of angst, and it's all wrapped in tape. It's taped up, and on the box it says, when I die, do not open this box, but please just burn it. I didn't want anyone to think that I wrote such poor poetry. In order to give you an introduction to this book, and you know a little bit about it from what you've been handed out this evening, I have two main characters, Fate McKee. He's called Fate because he was supposed to be named after his grandfather McPhail McFate, and I'm sorry, McPhee, and somebody made a mistake on his birth certificate and crossed the L, so his name was Fate. And Ludi, his older sister, she's 15, and she's very smart aleck, very smart mouth, and her only goal in life is to look good to boys especially. So I'm going to introduce her to you first, and then I'll let you meet Fate. Ludi McPhee struggled into the too-tight red turtleneck, smoothed it across her ribs, then checked herself out in the mirror of the Walmart dressing room. Yes, I always seem to work Walmart into my stories, so I'm known as the Walmart woman. She was almost pretty, but still had the not-quite-finished look of a teenager. Unlined skin dappled with sand-colored freckles, cheeks not quite shed of baby fat, frizzy hair too wild to be tamed by gel or spray. Her hips were as narrow as a boy's, and her feet looked too big for her tiny ankles and spindly legs. But worst of all, she was convinced, not for the first time that day, that her breasts were never going to grow beyond the 2 walnut-sized bumps on her chest. The best she could hope for was a wonder bra, but she doubted even that would perform the miracle she needed. She had a longing for the kind of attention so many other girls got seemingly without trying. Popular girls with rounded hips and breasts that bounced like water balloons, but with little promise that she was destined to become the next Pamela Anderson. She thought she could be willing to settle for less. If she could manage to give nature a boost, she would bleach her dark hair until it was the color of honey with streaks of gold. She would get more holes pierced in her ears and have a pair of kissing lips tattooed on her neck. She might even wear a nose ring. But until she could find a way to get out of Spearfish, South Dakota, that was not likely to happen. She took off the turtleneck, folded it into a neat square, then tucked it into the front of her underpants. She'd just re-zipped her jeans when someone knocked at the dressing room door. "This room is taken," she yelled. "Ludi, let me in." "I'll be out in a minute, Floy," she said, her voice edged with anger. "No, open the door." Ludi pulled on her old sweatshirt, bloused it around her hips, then unlocked the door. Floy Satterfield, at nearly 300 pounds, filled the doorway. She had long given up on diets, counting instead on having her stomach stapled when she could put the money together. But that was a dim prospect given her $400 a month welfare check and extra mouths to feed. "We've got to go," she said. "Go? We just got here." "Well, I ain't feeling good." "Well, what's wrong now?" Ludi came down hard on the now. "Damned indigestion again." Floy fumbled a roll of Tums from her purse and popped 2 in her mouth. "You go find your brother and meet me out front." "Well, I don't know where he is." "He'll be where he always is. Now hurry." 15 minutes later, she found her brother Fate in the electronics department at the keyboard of a display computer where he was trying to find out who invented shoelaces. Though he was only 11, he sometimes seemed to Ludi more like an old man than a child. He wore thick glasses with wire frames, worried about global warmings and the endangerment of pandas, and moved like creeping Jesus. He liked plaid shirts, buttermilk, and old clocks, and he had a habit of running his fingers through his hair, a habit which Ludi predicted would make him bald before he finished the 8th grade. He spent most of his time reading, watching weird TV shows about lighthouses, Roman baths, prairie dogs, Jack Kerouac, and the Khmer Empire, subjects that nobody else would give 2 hoots about, and he played games all by himself, Trivial Pursuit and Scrabble. He had no friends that she knew of, was never invited to sleepovers or slumber parties, campouts, or even birthday parties, and he never invited boys to the places where he and Ludi happened to be living. He went for long, solitary walks at night and in the rain, and he often talked in his sleep, but in strange languages she couldn't identify. Ludi wouldn't be surprised if he grew up to be a shepherd. So I'm hoping that in just those two short introductions you can see the contrast between these two sister and brother. She's not at all studious. She's not curious except about the way she looks to boys. And he, on the other hand, is curious about everything. He's a good student. He's very polite to everyone. And he tries to remain anonymous, just sort of hanging out places where people don't notice him. And then I thought maybe you'd like to see them together as brother and sister. They're on their way, since Floyd has just died at the checkout stand at the Walmart. They're on the way to stealing her car and driving to Las Vegas, where they believe their father might be. They've had a letter from him once in 2 years that he was in Las Vegas, so they believe he might still be there. They're spending their first night on the road, staying in a cheap motel that promises not much in the way of amenities. Fate tells her that they can't afford to stay in an expensive place like a Holiday Inn because they don't have the money to get there. The billboard on the highway claimed that the Cozy Up was loaded with amenities, but the amenities seemed limited to running water and dingy towels. Still, the room was cheap, and the hairy man, the manager, wearing plaid pajamas, hadn't seemed at all curious about two kids checking in at 2 in the morning. He was anxious to get back to bed. After Ludi took a shower, she wanted to watch TV, but all that they could get was a return of Matlock and a documentary on the Civil War, so she turned off the set and they both went to bed. 10 minutes later, they heard a car door slam, and Fate got up to peek out the window. "Who is it?" Ludi whispered. "A man going into the room next door." "You think he's a policeman?" "No, he looks more like a serial killer. One of those guys who strangles girls and cuts up their bodies." "Stop it, Fate." After Fate settled down again, they heard the toilet flush in the adjoining room. "He's probably getting rid of small body parts, fingers and toes, and damn it, Fate, don't you say another word." For the next half hour they listened to sounds coming through the wall, drawers closing, a man coughing, water running. When finally their neighbor grew quiet, Fate guessed that Ludi had gone to sleep. But when he turned on his side, facing her, he could see her face in the dim light coming through the window. Her eyes were open, staring at the ceiling. "Ludi?" "What?" "Can you remember what Mama looked like?" "Sure. I wish I could." "Well, you've seen pictures of her." "Yeah, but a picture's not the same thing. I mean, a picture just shows the way she looked when it was taken, that very second. Like the one of her standing beside the car holding me. She was smiling because she knew Daddy was going to take her picture. But she doesn't tell me what she looked like when she was cooking breakfast or how she looked when she was sad. I don't know what she looked like when she cried or when she was asleep. And those pictures don't show if she was left-handed like me, or how she sounded when she laughed, or the way she walked. They're just pictures." A silence settled on them then as the train passed somewhere nearby. Minutes later, after the sound had faded, Ludi said, "Sometimes I'm not sure if I remember Mama the way she looked in real life or the way she looked in a dream I had when I was little." "I never dream about her," Fate said. "Maybe if I did, I could remember what she looked like." "Fate, you were only 2 when she died. When you're 2, you're too young to remember anything at all, so I guess you shouldn't feel bad." They were quiet for several minutes until Fate said, "Ludi?" He waited, but could tell from her breathing that she was asleep. "I just wanted to tell you that I'm glad you let me come with you." When she made a weak, whimpering sound, he whispered, "Good night, sister." I'm not going to read any more because I'm afraid I'll give away too much of the book, and then you won't have to read it, and you won't buy it, and I won't make my money. These two are on their way to Las Vegas, and some bad things can happen in Las Vegas. If you've been there, I'm sure you've seen the Strip, and maybe you've been downtown to the Golden Nugget and some of the older casinos. But we rented a car, and we asked a man to take us to the seedier side of town, the side of town where we went into a shelter. We saw where homeless people live on the street. We went into a library that I described in great detail. The driver of the limo pointed out to us places where they might park the car and live in the car while they were in Las Vegas without being picked up by the police, because that was the last thing they wanted, was to be picked up and sent to a foster home. So from there, I'm going to stop, and I'm going to ask you if you have any questions you'd like to ask about this book or any other book I've written. I'll say anything, so you can ask anything. But you have to remember, I'm a fiction writer, so I might be telling the truth or I might be telling a lie. Yes?
Could you tell us about your favorite book signing experience and your worst one?
My favorite book signing experience and awards won. I think my favorite book signing experience was at the college where I taught in Durant, Oklahoma. It was a small state college, and many of my creative writing students came out. I told them if they didn't, they wouldn't pass the course. Most of the teachers came out, people that I'd known for a long time. I taught there for almost 27 years, so that was probably my favorite book signing. And the second part of your question was? Which one was the worst one? It happened in Charleston, North Carolina, about a week ago. 2 people came, and one of them I bought my own book for him. He was a cute boy. He was in the 8th grade, and he kept a journal of all the books he had read. And he'd read quite a few books. He, too, lived with his grandmother, so I thought I had something in common with him. He was a black child. He was rather heavy. He had several strikes working against him, and he was very interested in my book. He had never heard of it. He had never heard of me. There was no reason he should have, but I asked him if he'd like to have a copy of the book, and he said, "Can you do that?" And I said, "Sure, they let us give away books." So I told the woman just to put it back on the desk, and I would pay for it later. Oh, he was so proud of that book. He couldn't wait until his grandmother came to pick him up so she could see it. He was the first to leave, which left one person at my book signing. Oh, I had a book signing someplace in Florida once, and no one came. And the manager said to me, "Billie, you've got to sit closer to the entrance, and you have to try to sell your book." And I said, "Okay." So people would come in, I'd say, "You wouldn't be interested in buying this book, would you?" And I felt like I was selling painted seashells or something. So I've had a lot of bad signings, I can promise you. Yes, sir.
Where'd you get the inspiration for this story, Billie? I'm just curious.
Made in the USA?
Yes.
Well, it came partly from a short story that I started many years ago. And then my husband and I have 3 sons, but we have no grandchildren. And we have 3 pretend granddaughters. They're 3 Hispanic sisters who were in foster care, and at the time I met them, they were just getting ready to be split up. And my husband and I were cleared to take them for weekends, long weekends, maybe just before school started, because I like to buy them school clothes. I even got to buy a prom dress for a girl who was going to her junior prom, and as mother of boys, I'd never had that opportunity before. So we bought the dress, and we bought the strapless bra, and we bought the shoes and the makeup and the jewelry. We bought the whole thing, and she said that she had a wonderful time, and she brought me a picture. She looked beautiful. In the meantime, the 3 sisters were living in different places, so to get them, we had to be cleared to make sure we weren't perverts of some kind, to make sure that we weren't making meth in the house, and we weren't, not then anyway. And so these girls would come and spend time with us, and we had an agreement. They had to do something rather cultural with me, so I took them to 2 or 3 ballets, and I took them to plays, and they wanted to go to the aquarium and to the zoo. We went to museums. They weren't crazy about museums, but they went. And in exchange for that, I had to go with them to see slasher movies. The kind that you watch sort of like this, you know, you don't want to see it all. And I became very close to these girls. And I did a lot of talking to them about birth control. I wanted to make sure that they finished school. And I did a wonderful job because now one of them, who's 20, has 2 babies. And they're both by different men, and she's not married. The middle one has 1 child. She is married. Her husband is in Iraq. And the youngest has just turned 16, and she's been with the same foster family now for 2 years. And she's been selected to go to Washington, D.C. and tell her life story to hundreds of kids, to tell them how the Department of Human Services has turned her life around. So I'm very, very happy for her. I'm proud of all of them. And I hope that someday they'll remember something that sometime they spent with me. I'll always remember the time that they spent at our house. So that's where the idea came from. I'm very interested in what happens to children who are abandoned and neglected. And my son did me a grand favor. He went online to one site. I think it was called the Center for Exploited Children, and he found out that, are you ready for this? There were 3 million cases of abuse and neglect of children last year in this country. 3 million. There are only 3 million people who live in all the state of Oklahoma. 2,000 children disappear every day in this country. 800,000 disappear every year, and there are 3 children murdered every day. And if that doesn't make you want to do something about it, I don't know what will. There's so much that we can do. We can be mentors at school. We can go and read to children. We can be big brothers, big sisters, small grandmothers, small grandfathers. We can take children on outings if we have approval by the school. There's just a lot we can do to help the teachers. Their job is big enough. And we can help provide money and resources for parenting so that parents can do a better job of parenting. So it's just a subject I'm very interested in. Thank you for asking the question. Other questions? Yes.
Was made in the U.S.A. was that, well, first of all, I thoroughly enjoyed the book. It was a great escape.
Thank you.
Was made in the U.S.A. Was that your title or the publisher's?
Or was it?
The publishers, did you come up with
No, it was my title. All the books so far have been my titles. They asked me if I would like to change the title, Where the Heart Is, because so many books have been called Where the Heart Is, or Home is Where the Heart Is. You know, you cannot copyright titles. So I was thinking that perhaps my next book might be Harry Potter Visits Oklahoma. I think it'll sell.
Having read the book and not giving away what others haven't read, how does that fit in with the story? Because I didn't see a real strong connection. That's why I thought maybe
How did
the title.
the title fit in with the story? Because I think children in every culture are abused and neglected, but I don't think there's much we can do about children in other cultures. I think there's a lot we can do about those that are made right here in the U.S.A. I think that's a big enough job for us to tackle in the beginning, and then we could tackle some made in other countries. That was the connection. I hope that people got it, but obviously you didn't, so I'm changing it.
I mean, I loved it, but I didn't see a strong.
What do you think about Gone with the Wind during a tornado in Oklahoma? Why not? I really liked Fate, too. One of my other favorite characters was Bui Con, the Vietnamese man from the Honk and Holler. I'm thinking that if I write another book, and I'm sure I will, it might be a sequel to one of my books. Maybe that one, I don't know. Yes?
I loved that book. I mean, I just loved all of your books. But what was your inspiration for him? Did you know a Vietnam vet?
Oh, I knew Vietnam vets. I had them in class and in composition, and I also taught Vietnamese after the fall of Saigon. Our administration went to Fort Chaffee and picked out 150 Vietnamese and brought them to our school. And I was one of the teachers. They just needed bodies to teach. We didn't have anyone who was trained in teaching English as a second language. So my first class was a night class of Vietnamese men. The males and females were segregated in Vietnam, so we decided it would be a good idea for the first couple of semesters to keep them segregated here. Therefore, I taught reading, I taught composition, I taught anything you can think of that would have to do with English, I taught it. And I read their stories. I read stories that you would not believe, that would break your heart. And so it was really very easy for me to write Bui Khan. He was sort of a part of this story and a part of this story and a part of that story. It was very easy for me to write. Yes? Beautiful Child, I have not.
It's also about Las Vegas and children that are on the street in Las Vegas.
You mean someone plagiarized my story?
It is a much more harsh, even as harsh as Louis' life turned big. This was even harsher than that. My son, who was an avid reader, recommended it to me. And I'm sorry, I cannot think of the author's name. But
Beautiful Child is the name.
about the exploitation of children.
So you finished the book. You know about Ludi and what happened.
And I have to say to you that I was just enthralled by the twist that you did with her. And I never can. But I was very impressed with that.
Thank you.
In such a different way. It really went in a nice, I love the way it was. Yeah, I like that quite a bit.
Thank you.
It was very a wonderful way to.
Well, I think it would come as no surprise for people who haven't finished the book or haven't read the book to know that it's more or less a road story, that they've already left Spearfish, South Dakota, and they're on their way to Las Vegas. And who knows, they may go to another state. I won't say. Yes.
I didn't get the title, so you don't need to go and change the title.
Okay, thank you.
I thought you did a beautiful job on the cover, which is so beautiful.
Thank you.
It really just pops out on the book. So I don't know if that's your idea. But the other comment I want to make, when we were in Las Vegas, it just got really dark.
It turned very dark, didn't it?
It got like a bad storm.
First of all, let me tell you that I appreciate your comments about the cover that I did for this book. I'm sure the artist who did it would be sorry to hear that I took credit for it. No, one of the artists at Warner Books did the cover. I'll tell you a little story. She found in a catalog a fruit jar, and there was a little battery-operated switch inside the lid. So when you twisted the lid on and you flipped the little switch, inside there were tiny, tiny little electrical lines, and they lit, and they had little yellow lights that would light up like fireflies. So if you turned this on in a dark room, it looked like you had a jar of fireflies that you had collected. And yes, the book turned very dark. Perhaps I should tell you that my life turned very dark sometime back. First of all, my husband and I moved from our home of 27 years, and for a writer to change her nest, it's very traumatic. So we moved, and the house we moved into, we lived in for less than a year because we found out 2 people had committed suicide in the house, and it had a very bad feeling about the house. I'm not a ghost person, but some strange things happened in the house. So after we'd moved once and left the nest of 27 years, we moved a second time, a nest of only a year. And then we lived in a house 5 years, and it flooded. I mean, it flooded. The city finally bought it and demolished it. It's nothing but a mud hole now. And about that time, we moved into, well, the next day, we moved into a motel. And we had lived there only 3 days when my husband got the diagnosis that he had stage 4 lung cancer. He had already done a play in Chicago, our son's play. And then he got the call that it was going to Broadway. And he was honest with the producers and the director to tell them that he had cancer and it was incurable, but it was treatable. And they said, come on, we like that big oaky swaggering out onto the stage. And he would be so weak because he was doing chemo during the day and he was doing 8 shows a week at the theater. And he would be very, very weak, yet when he would walk out on stage, you couldn't tell it. There was the Oklahoma swagger that he had, and that voice could hit the back row of that theater, and it was a huge theater. So then after that, we lived in a hospital for a while, and then we lived in a nursing home, and then my husband passed away. So it was a dark time in my life. I don't know if that explains why I wrote a darker book. It has a much darker edge to it, and I'm sure that those of you who had read the first 3 books were shocked when you saw. I cried when I wrote some of the parts of this book, but I don't read those parts aloud. I don't think I could get through it without crying. Yes? Excuse me.
Explaining that because it did seem different than the rest of the book. I mean, this was like, really like way down.
Well,
I'm glad that
that's the way my life was going. Yeah, back up and yeah, down again. And just a few days after my husband died, we found out that our son had won the Pulitzer for the play that my husband had been in. And early during rehearsal, he had said to him, Tracy, you're going to win the Pulitzer for this play. And he said, oh, Dad, don't do that. Don't get my hopes up. And sure enough, he won the Pulitzer. And then he was most happy when the play won the Tony for Best Play because he was so proud of the cast. They brought the entire cast from Chicago to New York, with one exception, a high school girl who couldn't leave. Thank you. And there was a question here. Yes. Okay, then you know what it's like. Right.
And that didn't work out. Not really because of her fault. And then you go with Andy, and she comes back to that again. Did you know that he wrote the original, first part of the original?
Yes. Yes.
So that's a great circle.
Good. Thank you. The question was about the circle that I've created, that Ludi was a gymnast in high school. She got kicked off the gymnastic team, but it wasn't really her fault. Somebody who was jealous had started a lie that spread around the school, and she was kicked off the team. And later in the book, I bring gymnastics back into her life. I always know when I start a book where it's going to begin. Now, I might change it. I know that when I wrote Where the Heart Is, I started that back in Tennessee before they left, and it just didn't work. And then I started it when he dropped her at the Walmart, abandoned her at the Walmart, and that didn't work because there was backstory I needed to tell. And finally I found the place to do it, and that's while they're on the road. But usually I have a pretty good idea of where the story's going to start, and I have up here how the story's going to end. I just don't know what's going to happen during the middle of the story. That's where the surprises come in, and that's what's fun about writing for me. Other questions? Yes.
What's your writing process?
I would go to writers' conferences, and I would listen to writers say, I get up every morning at 4 o'clock, and I write until 9, and then I then I take a short nap, and then I have a snack, and then I go back to writing, and I write until 4. And I'd try that, just exactly the way I'd taken my notes. It didn't work for me at all because I'm not an early morning person, and getting up at 5 or 6 o'clock in the morning was not my idea of fun. And then I tried just writing at night, but I would get too sleepy. And so what worked for me was having big chunks of time. I needed a chunk of time, like a week, like a summer. Having the idea of a summer off was just so appealing to me. And I did that. I planned a summer so I could write. And I had to have surgery, and I missed the whole summer that I had set aside for writing. Yes?
The name of the play that your son liked.
It was called August, Osage County. Osage County is because Oklahoma is a Native American country, we have a lot of our counties named after Indian tribes, and there is an Osage tribe, and so the county was named Osage County. And it came from a poem, Autumn, Osage County, written by a wonderful friend of ours who's since passed away. And my son used his title to honor him. Yes?
Just a comment. When I read your first book, Where the Heart Is, I kept seeing that as a play.
Did you?
I could see it being played out on the stage. Do you write plays?
I wrote one, yes. And our theater company, our community theater company, did it in Durant as a stage reading, more or less. It was a lot of fun. I had written it as a screenplay, and then I couldn't get anyone interested in it, and so I decided, well, I'll just write it as a stage play and see if they like it any better then, and they did. They did. I have one original screenplay that opens at 150 theaters next month in Mexico. That's because the man who produced it and directed it got his backing money from Mexico, and that was their deal, that the play would open in Mexico. And as a favor to me, it's opening the first night to 1,000 homeless Mexican children. Now I'm going to cry. It's a film. It's a film. So if I start crying, just pay no attention. But it was a wonderful surprise for me that he did that. Yes?
I think, I don't know if it's a question as much as a comment, but I'm blown away that Tracy Letts is your son. That just hit me here tonight, because I just got done reading that play, and you must read the play.
Did you like it?
Book Expo. No, it's fantastic. You know, it is the hottest ticket on Broadway right now. You're so underplaying it. It's just so great. So he comes by his talent, obviously, but it's got everything. That play is so rich.
Well, thank you.
But also, I started my career as a reporter in Las Vegas Sun, covering sex crimes and child abuse. That's all I did for 3 years in the 80s in Las Vegas. And I read your book, and I read Beautiful Children, which only came out in the last year. Your book is so much stronger than that. And Beautiful Children got all this hype and all this attention, but I think your book's very, very truthful when it gets dark, because it just really, it's what makes it more profound and meaningful. I think honest.
And it's what happens in Las Vegas and Los Angeles and Chicago and New York.
And I really think you capture it. And I also want to just say that your characters are people that just really, I think about again and again. And again, somebody said that I don't think about necessarily your main characters. I think about Forney from Where the Heart Is, and the guy who became a country music singer. And I always think about him getting his teeth fixed in one day. And things like this, and I meet people who remind me of him. And I just think you have a real gift for portraying real people that I don't think a lot of authors can do quite as well as you. I just want to say that.
Thank you, thank you. $100, is that what we agreed on?
No.
Well, I'm going to read Beautiful Child. You can bet on that. Beautiful Children. Beautiful Children. I have a question for you. You had that beat for 3 years. How did you last 3 years without burnout?
It was terrible, but I was right out of college, and so it was a great place to learn journalism and news.
I'm sure.
And reporting, but all I did was prostitutes and child abuse.
Oh, I'm sure. That must have been very, very difficult. I can't imagine doing that kind of writing. And
Just the neighborhoods that you must have gone to and so forth.
yeah, you could recognize them.
Now than it was in the 80s. Vegas.
Yeah, I think they've cleaned it up quite a bit. I hope they have. And if I've underplayed my son's talent, I apologize. He's the most talented person in the world, and he got it all from me. His father was a great writer, too. He just didn't have the discipline. He just couldn't keep his butt in the chair. Yes.
Is this your son sitting back there that you travel with?
Yes. The one who left?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You bored to death, and why did he leave?
Probably bored. More than likely, he's probably hurt.
A writer also?
He is, but he composes music and writes song lyrics. He's a professional musician in Singapore. He was traveling with a band doing Asian tours, and they first stop was Singapore, and then they went on to Korea and Japan. And the second tour he did, the first stop was Singapore, and he met the same woman for the second time, and they've been married now for almost 20 years. So he lives in Singapore, but he's been home now for several months. He stayed with me since I lost my husband, and he was determined to do this tour with me. And he said, "Mom, it's got to be hard on you." He said, "You know, I'm 48." He said, "But you're 70. It's got to be really hard on you." And when we finished the first half of the tour, he said, "I am just worn out. I don't know how you do it." And it is tiring.
I think your porta potties only make a good story.
Don't you? Isn't that a good story?
I like that.
If you ever see Ann River Siddons, ask her about that. She'll wonder, where in the world did he hear that story? Are there any other questions? Yes.
What was the very first adult name besides Nelson Lakers?
The first,
You were more involved, interested in adult literature than you were.
Flannery O'Connor. Our library didn't have Flannery O'Connor because it was a grade school, but our middle school had Flannery O'Connor, and I loved, first of all, her short stories. And there's even a section in this book that reminds me a great deal of "A Good Man is Hard to Find." I don't know if you know that story or not. I think that's the one, isn't it, where the real nutcase gets in the car and drives them all down the country road, and he's going to... Yeah, that's it, the grandmother, who's such a bitch.
When she was 4 years old, her idea of life leading with Nelson.
Really? Well, Flannery O'Connor's been a big, an important influence in my life as a reader and as a writer. Sean, you missed a question about you. I'm sorry that you left. The gentleman said, "Did you just get bored, or did you have to leave?"
I went to smoke a cigarette. I've heard all this stuff before.
I didn't think you'd admit it. And they have another brother. They have a third brother who's a musicologist, and he's also a librarian at Northeastern State University, where my husband and I met. And he's the closest to me. He's just 45 minutes away, so if I need anything, he's there. He's always there. Other questions?
Just a comment. Have you ever thought of getting your headshot redone? Because you have far more pizzazz and glamour than this depicts. I think you ought to get it.
Which one do you have?
Well, it's the same picture.
Oh, this one on the back of the book? Oh, my. Don't tell my friend in Tennessee that. She took this picture on a bridge, and the sun was in my eyes. And I could barely see anything. So we won't tell her that, but thank you for the compliment. Pizzazz. I'll have to remember that, pizzazz. Does that have 2 Z's? At least 2. I like that answer. Any other questions? Yes.
Could you talk just a little bit about how you choose names for your characters? I'm thinking more about where the heart is, because the names of the characters are so central to who they are. And the more unusual and authentic a person's name is, the stronger of a character they are.
Sure, I'd be glad to. Which reminds me, I didn't totally answer a question that came from down front. It was something about my schedule of writing. That's your question. I didn't completely answer that. I finally found out that what was best for me was just to write whenever I had the chance. I was never good at stealing an hour or half an hour or even 2 hours, but I was good at stealing a whole day. You know, calling in the school and saying, I'm pretty sure I have bronchitis. And then writing all day. Weekends, I did most of it. While I was teaching, I did most of my writing on weekends. And then that one summer that I took off, I wrote by hand mostly. I didn't sit at the typewriter. And now the other question was...
Names. About how you choose the names.
Oh, the names. Well, in the first book, I knew a woman named Novaline, Leen, and I always liked the name. So I stole that name from her. There was a family there of Takes Horse. We have a lot of beautiful Native American names and African American names. Did you know at one time that Oklahoma was considered as an all-black state? And so we still have all-black towns in Oklahoma. And we have so many wonderful Native American tribes. So I took the name Takes Horse from then, and when Bill and Gwen Takes Horse showed up for my signing in Sherman, Texas, I hadn't told them that I'd stolen their last name. And I didn't know. I'm smiling, and they're just kind of looking at me, you know. And then when they got up close, they smiled, and they each gave me a homemade gift. She gave me a pillow that she had embroidered, and he gave me something that goes on a saddle, but I don't have a saddle. I don't have a horse. But anyway, it was their way. It was their tradition. They were horse people. They're the ones who stole horses from other tribes and took wonderful care of them. And they could heal horses when other tribes couldn't. And so the Takes Horse came. Forney came from a town in Texas. There's a town called Forney, Texas. Also, I dated a boy named Forney when I was about 15. I lied about it, and not his name, but I lied about sneaking out of the house at 15. I was a mess when I was a girl. Some of these names, I'd like to tell you, have special meaning to me because they do, but some of them I actually take from the phone book. Isn't that terrible? So names have importance to me because in college I had to take a Russian literature class. And if you've ever read Russian literature, you're constantly looking back and back and back and back trying to find out who that character is because they're so hard to remember. So I finally took the first initial of the first name, and I'd call him K, and he'd be N, and she'd be M, and he'd be P, and he should be Q, and so forth. And that's the way I got through Russian literature. And I don't ever want anyone to look back and wonder who is Betty and Bob and Bernice and so forth. So I came up with, I hoped, unusual names. Fate, that was meant to be. That was fate. Moses White Cotton was a name that just came to me in one of those Zen moments. I knew immediately what his name was, and Galilee Jackson was the same. And one of my favorite scenes that I've ever written was the one between Galilee Jackson and Bui Khan in the church when she sees him carrying the Buddha down front, and she thinks he's getting ready to smash the church up with a big rock. And he's trying to explain to her in his very poor English that it's not a rock, it's a Buddha. And then at the end of that scene, she reaches out and touches his cheek, and she said, with my lands, we feel just We feel just alike, she said. I'm a crier. Pay no attention. Other questions? Yes.
What's your best writing advice for writers?
Oh, I can tell you're a writer. I can tell from the questions you ask. The question is, what's your best advice for a writer? I've got a lot of them. The first one is to read the book by Anne Lamott called Bird by Bird. Isn't that wonderful? If you haven't read it, read it, whether you're interested in writing or not. It's called Bird by Bird, B-I-R-D, by Bird, B-I-R-D. And the reason is that her father was a writer, and she had a little brother, and he had to write a school paper on birds. And so he gathered all the material. He had books on birds and pictures of birds, and he had starts and false starts and false starts. And his father passed through the kitchen and saw all this stuff he'd spread on the table, and the boy's sitting there chewing on the pencil, and he doesn't know. And the father put his hand on his shoulder and said, "Son, just write it bird by bird." And if you're going to write, if you're going to write a novel, don't think of having to write a novel. Take Anne Lamott's advice and think you're writing through the picture frame of a postage stamp, or you're writing just as far as the headlights can see at night. You don't write the whole thing at once. You just write it page by page. And you try not to think too far ahead, but your mind won't leave you alone. So have a scratch pad there, and that's for future ideas. And you'll write down 1,000 of them that you won't use, but there'll be 10 that will come in handy. And then my next advice is to get your butt in that typing chair and keep it there no matter what happens. And if you're a family person, if you have a husband and several children, you pick a time during the week, and that's your time. What's your first name? What? Anna. You make a special sign for your door. Let your kids make it, even if you have kids. And it says Anna's time. And you put it on the door, and that means you'll take no phone calls, you'll not stir the soup, you're not going to empty the dishwasher, you're not going to fold the towels. That's your time to write. And it's not your time ever to be disturbed. You're not going to take phone calls, unless, of course, it's a tragic phone call, a bad message. But that's your time. And the more you can put that sign up there and the longer you can keep it there, the more you can get done. And if you have a large family and you have to cook a big meal and you have to do the dishes, let everybody help you now and then, and take some of that and make it Anna's time. That's about the best I can tell you. Also, I can tell you, never give up. I was 56 when I started my first book. I had written all my life, but I had written short fiction and bad poetry, and I'd written screenplays for about 10 years, I guess. And I think that makes my writing more visual in a way. Someone asked if I'd written a play. No, I'd only written the one play, I think. But I think it is visual because of screenwriting. Other questions? Yes? Do I think the movie will come here after it plays in Mexico? Well, that's what we're hoping. We're hoping that it brings in enough in Mexico that they can afford to get distribution in the United States. It's not easy to get distribution. It'll be easier right now following the strike, but everybody's afraid to move forward because they're afraid now, instead of the stagehand strike, there's going to be the actors' strike. It's called Veritas, the Prince of Truth. It's a no, it's in English, but to show it in Mexico, they're going to dub it all in Spanish, and then they're going to put the subtitles in English. And when it comes here, it'll all be in English, but there'll be subtitles in Spanish because some of it is in Spanish. It's a story of a comic book superhero who pulls himself out of a comic book into this world because he finds out that his artist is going to have to kill him off in the next few issues because he's become sort of old-fashioned superhero, and he's come to find his artist, but he knows nothing about this planet, so he needs the help, and he goes to his biggest fan, who's a little boy. Any other questions? Yes?
Who are some of your current writers that you like to read?
Oh, I like Maya Angelou a lot, and she's influenced me a great deal. For instance, in one of these books, I can't remember which one right now, but they change people's names. Oh, I think it was in the first book. People's names are changed, and she wrote a short story called, I think it was Marguerite, and they changed her name. They thought the woman she was working for thought it was much too old, and so much too long, so she changed it. I also like Sandra Cisneros. She wrote Woman Hollering Country, and my favorite story, Woman Hollering Creek, thank you. My favorite story in there is only 2 pages long. It's called Salvador, Late or Early. I'm waiting on Sean to say early or late, but it's not. I've got it right now. I like Ann Tyler. I read John Grisham. Somebody told me, no one reads John Grisham anymore. You're not cool if you read John Grisham. And I thought, well, to hell with you. I'll read who I like. I don't read the classics very much because I had to read so many in college and getting my master's degree especially. So I don't read the classics very much. I read a lot of mainstream fiction, the kind of fiction that I write. Okay, I don't know how much time I've taken, but...
We're out of time. You can sign the books now.
Okay.
A lot for you.
Okay. And let me applaud you. You've been a wonderful audience. Thank you very much.